Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. David Burr with the Automotive Retailers Association, and we're here today with representatives from the provincial government looking at our application of PST. So what I'm going to do, we did have a different speaker originally scheduled. Unfortunately, Elizabeth is feeling under the weather, so there's no point in reading her bio as it doesn't apply today. So I will turn it over to Darren, if he can maybe introduce himself, and then we'll get the team, Stephen and Zolfi, to introduce themselves as well. So Darren, over to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Jimmy. So good morning, everybody. My name is Darren Knox. I am in the outreach section. Yes, my team Elizabeth has a sinus infection, so I stepped in the last second to pick this up and read her notes. My bio is basically the same as hers. I'm in the Ministry of Finance. I've actually been with the Ministry of Finance since 2013 when PST came back in outreach. And what outreach does is we help with events like this. I was explaining to David earlier that in my position, I do a little about a lot of things. So I cover all the taxes. And then that's why I have my teammates, Zolfi and Steve here to help answer questions later on. They're with the ministry as well, but they are involved a lot more in PST than I am. We're really happy that you asked the ministry to attend and to help your association. So we really, really appreciate that you've taken the time to attend this, and we hope you can get something out of the time together. Now, we were provided a list of topics specific to your group, as well as a list of questions sent in advance, and we developed this presentation around those topics and those questions. Some of the questions will be answered in the presentation as we go, and then there's a few that I've got answers for that I'll read out at the end of the presentation as well. They're quite long answers, so I'll cover that when we finish the main presentation.
And also, and for our membership, just so you know, we would ask that if you do have questions today, that you use the Q&A portion. You can either identify yourself or you can ask the question anonymously, depending on how you want it handled. But otherwise, the panel will be able to see the questions. And as mentioned, if we're not able to answer it today, we will have Zolfi and Stephen that can access the information and provide us updates at a later time. So, but we will do our best to try to answer all your questions and issues today. And as mentioned, yes, the first time we did this was back in 2013. So it's been 10 years since we've had a discussion on PST application, so looking forward to it.
Okay, so it was my plan is to go through a section. Like generally, when we do these presentations, we ask people to hold questions to the end, but I think for your group, because these sections tend to go all over the place, we'll go through a section, and then if you've got some questions about what we just talked about, you can enter them in the chat and we'll answer them then. But no fear, if you don't think of something until later on, we will also loop back at the end of the presentation as well and try and pick up as many questions as possible. And then when it comes to the question and answer, I just want to mention that we can only speak to how legislation and policy apply as of today. Zolfi, Stephen, we can't really talk about what the tax was. We can't forecast what the tax could be or how could it apply in the future. And we can't really answer as to why a certain policy exists. For example, I know that it's a concern, like why is there PST charged on used vehicles? Well, all we can really say about that is under the legislation, PST applies to both new and used goods. If you've got concerns about the policy itself or questions about taxation direction, you and your association actually would be better served forwarding that to the minister's office for consideration in future budgets. Unfortunately, Zolfi, Steve, and I can only really talk about what there is right now. And then if it changed next year, we change it to be what it is then. But right now, we can only talk about the legislation as it applies today.
Sounds good. Okay, so maybe we can get a little quick introduction from Zolfi and Stephen so they can say hello to everybody, if they wouldn't mind unmuting, and then we'll get this presentation started.
Hey, yeah, I'll make this very quick. Nice to meet you all. My name's Stephen. I'm a policy and legislation analyst in the revenue division with the Ministry of Finance.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. My name is Zulfikar Ali. I go by Zolfi, and I'm also a policy analyst in the revenue division with Stephen. Nice to meet you all.
And thank you for fixing the echo.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so here we go. So some of the topics we're asked to touch on today include some PST basics, self-assessing, shop supplies, bundled sales, vehicle appraisals, what the tax rates for vehicle sales are, refunds, audits, and I'm going to cover quickly some resources we have available to you. Now, we do have a decent amount of time to cover this, so I'm going to try and go slow and easy, and hopefully get all your questions answered. But before we get into specific industry details, we're just going to cover some basic PST concepts and lay a little bit of a foundation for the later content. So provincial sales tax, commonly referred to as PST, is one of two main sales taxes charged in British Columbia. PST is administered through us, the provincial government, through legislation and regulation. Now, there is another sales tax in British Columbia, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's the Goods and Service Tax, or GST. The GST, however, is administered by the federal government through the Canada Revenue Agency, or CRA. So it's important for us to note that we actually can't answer questions or give you advice about the GST. It's not our tax. We don't really know that much about it. Well, we know a little bit, but we can't answer your questions about it. You will need to speak to the CRA for any concerns you have about goods and service tax. And also, if you're British Columbia, you're aware there's probably other sales taxes like motor fuel tax, carbon tax, tobacco tax. But for today's presentation, we're going to simply focus on PST itself. So what is the PST? Well, the PST is a retail sales tax that applies when you purchase or lease taxable goods. It applies to goods that you purchase or lease in BC, you bring into British Columbia for use in British Columbia, or you send or receive delivery of in the province for use in the province, unless an exemption applies. So specifically looking at your industry, you must pay PST on vehicles that you purchase, lease, or receive a gift of in British Columbia, in vehicles that you purchase, lease, or receive as a gift outside of the province and bring into the province, unless a specific exemption applies. And also you must pay PST regardless of whether the vehicle is for personal or business use, even if you're registered as a PST collector. The rate of PST you must pay varies, and we will discuss those rates in a little bit. Now, PST applies to purchases of taxable services as well, including related services, which is very applicable to your industry, and also to software if it's purchased for use on an electronic device ordinarily situated in British Columbia, again, unless an exemption applies. You're going to hear me mention exemptions a few times. We will talk about them a little bit later in the presentation. Everyone who purchases or leases taxable goods and services pays PST, and that includes us and the government, schools and universities, even hospitals and crowns corporations. They all pay PST on the goods they purchase for their own use. A business that sells or leases taxable goods or services collects the PST on behalf of the government, holds tax funds in trust, and then reports and remits or pays the tax to the government on the reporting schedule. So as I mentioned, PST applies to the purchase or lease of both new and used goods, unless there's a specific exemption. And PST is payable on the total amount paid to receive the goods, which may include delivery charges. So for goods that are brought, sent, or delivered into the province for use in the province, PST is payable on the total amount paid to bring the goods into the province. You would pay PST on all the costs involved getting it here, including charges for transportation, customs, and any other costs except for GST. So for example, I bought some cycling shoes from Adidas US. I had them shipped up to Canada. I actually had to pay PST on the courier service and their brokerage. So PST is on the total amount paid to bring the goods into the province. Okay, we're going to switch into more specific topics now, talk about self-assessment. I don't have a real self-assessment example at this point, but this topic does come up in later slides. So we're going to talk about it, and then it'll get touched on in greater detail as we go through the presentation. Okay, you must pay PST on the purchase or lease of new or used taxable goods that you use in your business. If your supplier does not charge you PST on taxable items, you must self-assess the PST due on your next PST return. So for example, if you ordered goods that you use in your business, or for which we deem you to be the end user of the good, and your supplier does not consider or charge PST, then you need to self-assess. Actually, let me talk about one more thing on this. I should add, if for some reason you're actually someone who isn't a PST collector, but you're on this presentation and you're thinking, well, hang on, I don't have a PST return. We actually do have what's called a casual remittance return that you can do. So if you're not a PST registrant, but you've collected PST or you need to self-assess PST, you can also use a form, I think it's a FIN 405, and you can actually remit a casual remittance return. If you have any questions about that, ask me at the end of the presentation. I can point you to the resource. Silly as me, I assumed that you're all PST registrants, but that may have been a bad assumption to make. So change in use. Well, what does this mean? Well, if you take taxable goods, such as parts from your resale or your lease inventory for your own business or personal use, you must sell PST on your cost of goods and remit it on your next return. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a crate of wiper blades that you bought PST exempt because they were for resale, like you sell wiper blades. And then it turns out that you have to use some of those wiper blades in the course of your business. You need to then self-assess PST due on your cost of those goods. If you purchase both exempt goods for resale and taxable goods that we use in your business as a single purchase, you may want to tell your supplier which goods are exempt and which goods are taxable. For example, if you order 2 cases of wiper blades and one is for resale and one is for your own use, you may want to advise your supplier, because then they'll charge you PST on the ones for your own use and you'll be exempt from PST on the ones that are for resale.
Actually, a good opportunity to maybe ask a question that's come up here, and there have been a couple of questions, and one question from Mike. I'm going to wait on yours because it will be covered off later in the presentation. But one question: can a service provider, in this case a body shop, request no PST from a supplier so that they can self-assess on all purchases?
Steve Rizolfi, do you want to tackle that one? I know a bit of an answer from doing real property contractors, but I don't want to answer in a case it's different. Oh, you're muted there, buddy.
You're muted, Stephen.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry about that. I was actually talking to Zolfi.
Okay.
This is a new one. I haven't seen that one pop up. I feel like this is a question that I'll have to look into, or probably a good question to submit to our rulings team and give them the specifics, what it is exactly that you're hoping to not be charged PST on, and why self-assessing would be beneficial. And then I think the rulings team can give you a very precise answer on that one. And we'll have the rulings email address for you guys at the end of this. But yeah, I apologize. I think that's probably the best answer we can give you right now. There's probably a lot of detail in that rulings will probably need to give you an accurate answer on that one.
Understood, because I'm also wondering as well too. I mean, there must be some advantage to doing it that way, just at least in the sense of perhaps the ease of application, knowing that PST has been covered off in those scenarios versus sometimes I'm charged, sometimes I'm not. How do I keep track of all of that? So I can see the rationale as to why they may want to go that way for ease of application. But yeah, certainly if you can investigate that, that would be great. Thank you.
I do know for real property contractors, we talk about inventory management options, because a lot of contractors like electrical or plumbing will have a storefront and do supply and install. So I don't know if this applies to, so that's why I hesitate to answer this, but I'll sort of really high level speak about it. But I would still suggest jump in, maybe send a ruling in. But for contractors, we say that you have several options you can choose to do, and we can't tell you what to do, but you can buy all your goods exempt for resale, and then self-assess on the goods that you use in your business. Or you can purchase and pay PST on all your goods, and then the ones that you actually end up reselling, you apply for a refund of PST on, or you split your inventory like we talked about in here, and you buy some exempt and some taxable. But again, I hesitate to say that as a definitive answer because I do that in the contractor presentation. So I would again suggest maybe just pop our rulings a quick email to confirm that that's accurate for your situation as well.
Yes, and I second that.
Okay, yeah, but I think we're on the right track there. But again, we're just it was a different presentation, so I don't want to say it's a definitive answer. All right. Yeah, I can't believe I knew something. Yay. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, you must pay PST if you purchase or lease taxable goods or services outside of the province, and then you bring, send, or receive the goods in BC for use. And remember, of course, you pay PST on total purchase price, including transport, custom, excise, brokerage, except for GST. If your supplier does not charge you PST at the time of sale or lease, you must self-assess the PST due on your next return, which can happen, especially if you're dealing with some overseas resellers. They don't even know what PST is. Okay, actually, we finished. That's sort of we sort of finished self-assessing there. Are there any more questions about that? I know we just answered one there, but did any other ones come in while I was rambling on there?
No, not at this point.
Perfect. Okay, that was just the one we talked about. Okay, excellent. Skip on. Okay, shop supplies. Now we're really getting into your stuff. No one else does shop supplies like this. Okay, and I'm gonna be ready for. We'll be ready for questions on this as we go. Trust me. So parts versus shop supplies. Now, goods that are used in the repair of vehicles and remain attached to the vehicle, like parts or paint, are exempt from PST for the service provider or mechanic. But parts that do not remain attached to the vehicle after the repairs are provided, things like shop supplies like tape, paper towels, rags, consumables, those are actually subject to PST for the service provider because the service provider consumes them during the repair or restoration, refinishing of the vehicle. The use of shop supplies by a service provider meets the definition of use under the PST legislation. They are not parts and they don't remain attached to the vehicle after the service has been provided. Therefore, the service provider must pay PST on their shop supplies. And just to reiterate, if you purchase shop supplies from outside of British Columbia and are not charged PST, you are required to self-assess from at PST due. So we're talking about things that you use that the person doesn't drive out with attached to their vehicle, like masking tape and rags and all that kind of stuff. You know, gloves, things that are used in the actual work itself. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert at your industry, so if I'm not nailing it perfectly, please ask us questions to clarify. Now, PST applies to related services provided to vehicles, and the purchase price of related service is the total amount paid by the customer to you for that service. So when you invoice your customer for repair services and you charge them for shop supplies, the shop supplies become part of the purchase price of the repair service and are subject to PST to the customer. The PST applies to shop supplies whether they're listed separately or is charged as a flat rate on the invoice. All right, we're still good on questions there, okay? So here's some exemptions. A number of services to vehicles, including cleaning services and car waxing and polishing, are specifically exempt from PST, provided no other taxable related services provided in conjunction with an exempt service. These exempt services are all listed in Bulletin PST 118, Vehicle Services and Parts, and I will show you at the end of the presentation how you can find these bulletins. Let's give you a quick example. Just washing a vehicle is exempt of PST, but cleaning a vehicle before painting would form part of the taxable purchase price of the taxable painting service and therefore would not be exempt. And again, you must pay or self-assess PST on all goods, including shop supplies used in providing this exempt service. Therefore, you do not charge PST to your customer on the shop supplies used to provide the exempt auto detailing service. Okay, I see some questions have come in, so
Yes.
let's see if we can cover them.
Yeah, so one of the questions is talking about, probably the easier one first, is when you buy from the USA and they say they collect tax that BC requires, how do you know if the government's actually seeing the taxes that have been collected? And I'm not sure if there is an ability for that. I'm sure that there's audits and assessments that are done for those companies as well.
All right, gentlemen.
Yeah, so that one is, I mean, we do have teams set up. We have different branches and divisions and people that are responsible for that. I can't really speak to how they're ensuring that it's collected, but I do know we have people that do that. They'll do their checks, their audits and whatnot. So I unfortunately I can't answer as to how they do it and how they insure it, but we do have people who are on it.
Yeah, and
yeah.
CBSA also will collect tax on items that cross the border as well.
Right. And that's federal, by the way.
Yeah. The other one on here,
the other questions in regards to the double taxation concern, and I know that's been raised and was raised in through a survey as well in past four. So I'm not sure if maybe you guys have the ability to talk a little bit about the concerns about PST being charged twice.
I actually have a fulsome response to that on the list of questions to talk about at the end of the presentation. So if you can hang on, I will be going through a lengthy 2-paragraph reply that these gentlemen have provided to me. So I have some information, and then if that doesn't quite cover off exactly what you want to hear, or you have more questions, you can provide more questions, and then we can try and dig in a bit farther. But I do have a full answer on that to do at the end of the presentation.
Sounds good. Okay,
Will that
thanks,
be okay?
Darren. I think
All right.
that's it for the questions for right now. So if you want to carry on.
Okay. Look at us rolling along. Okay, we're going to talk about something we call bundled sales. So let's just dive right in. If you sell taxable and non-taxable goods, software, services, or property together for a single price, you're making what we call a bundled sale. The general rule for charging PST on a bundled sale is that you charge PST only on the fair market value on the taxable portion of that sale. However, there's some exceptions and little caveats to that. So the first one is you would charge PST on the entire single price for a bundled sale if the fair market value of the taxable portion is greater than 90% of the single price, the overall price, and that overall price is less than $500, or the non-taxable portion is not ordinarily available for sale separately from the taxable portion, or is not ordinarily provided separately from the taxable portion for a price. So that's to say, in the bundle of goods, there's a non-taxable good that is only available in this bundled format. It's not available for sale anywhere else. So that basically this doesn't apply if that non-taxable portion is ordinarily available for sale or ordinarily provided separately from taxable portion, even if you don't sell it. So there's a basket of goods and there's an item in it that's non-taxable, and the only way you can get it is in that basket, then PST may apply to this entire single price. But if that item in the basket is something that you don't sell, but let's say, I don't know, Canadian Tire sells, then this wouldn't apply. There was an exemption for bundled sales. Your customer is exempt from PST on a bundled sale if all of these criteria are met. So the taxable portion is sold for a single price with the non-taxable portion. The fair market value of the taxable portion is $50 or less, and 10% or less of the total fair market value of all the items and services sold for the single price. The taxable portion is pre-packaged with the non-taxable portion, where you don't ordinarily sell the taxable portion separately from the non-taxable portion. Oh man, that's a tongue twister. The taxable portion is not being provided by way of promotional distribution. And finally, the taxable portion does not include liquor, cannabis, telecommunication services, or legal services. So there's a lot there. There is a bulletin 316 on bundled sales and leases. So if you've got more questions about that, just place to look. But we will talk about what fair market value is here just to clarify that concept. How would you determine fair market value of a taxable portion of a bundled sale or lease? When this happens, we let you estimate the fair market value of the taxable portion and charge PST that value. All we ask is that you keep a record of how you determined or why you determined the fair market value, like on the invoice or something attached to an invoice. Because if we do audit you, we may request information to support why you chose that estimate amount. All right, so at that point, let me see if any more questions have come in about bundled sales. There's just a comment. Unfortunately, it's one of the things I can't comment on there, Mr. Bartok. That was 2013, so I can't actually talk about that concept. Sorry. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about bundled sales? This was something that came up for your industry in a previous presentation I did to an automotive group here in Victoria, so it was included as part of this one as well.
Okay,
No,
not seeing
we're all
anything
good?
else coming
Okay.
through on this, so.
Okay.
I just wanted to add quickly, if you do have questions, this might seem a lot to process right now, but PST 316, as Darren mentioned, bundle sales, it has examples, quite a few of them. So if you have that, if you go through it briefly, it's a short bulletin that should help you sort of understand this concept more.
Great, thanks, Oli. Thanks, Sophie. Okay. One question we were asked about was vehicle appraisals. So I only had a one slide review of it, but there's a very long speaking portion of this. So I'll go through it all, and then if you've got questions about vehicle appraisals, we can cover them at this time. Okay, now this response came right from these gentlemen here, so I'm just going to read it kind of out as it was sent to us. So with vehicle appraisals, effective October 1st, 2022, which is just early last year, there is a kind of a new rule on how we determine the value of impounded vehicles for the purposes of calculating PST. So this is impounded vehicles. The new rules will be applicable to the vehicles transferred to the impound lot operator, or ILO. I'm just going to keep saying ILO for short here as we go along. In most cases, the ILO will be acquiring the vehicle for resale purposes, so they will be acquiring the vehicle exempt of PST. In the rare instance where they keep the vehicle for their own business use, they are required to pay PST on the higher of the designated purchase price, which would be the value of the impound fees owed to them presumably, or the average wholesale value. And I believe it's Black Book that ICBC is using. They could get an appraisal if the condition of the vehicle was a factor, and here's a little more about that. Appraisals may be obtained by the purchaser or seller of the motor vehicle, and appraisals may be completed in person or remotely by a qualified appraiser. The appraiser must complete a motor vehicle appraisal form, which is our FIN 320, for those who like to Google things and find them. It's listed on the slide as well. For more details on this, you would see notice 2022-005 PST motor vehicles purchased at private sales or imported from outside Canada. There's some other considerations with this. When a vehicle is impounded, it cannot be moved. The ILO cannot move the vehicle to another impound lot during the impoundment period, and neither can the registered owner. The only exception is if the peace officer who impounded the vehicle directs the ILO to move it, which may be required as part of an investigation. It's the whole world I know nothing about here. However, ILOs can provide access to the vehicle during normal business hours and supervise any access by the registered owner or person authorized by the owner. And an appraiser can accompany the registered owner of the vehicle or their authorized person to the impound lot during business hours for an appraisal under the supervision of the ILO, or have the appraisal done remotely under the supervision of ILO and during normal business hours in the lot where the vehicle is impounded. An ILO will only release a vehicle once they receive an order of release sent by Road Safety BC, ICBC, or a peace officer. Okay, is there any questions? This one's like a whole new concept to me, so I was just reading that there. Are there any questions about it?
I've not seen anything come up as of yet. I know
Okay.
this was a very specific issue raised by that segment of our membership, so I'm not sure if there's anybody on board that has any further questions or issues in regards to this.
It's okay. If you're still trying to absorb it, you can ask them at the end. And again, those resources are listed on there, but sorry, that was very mechanical, but that was just a very specific answer to a very specific question. I sort of had to just read verbatim there. I didn't want to ad lib anything and get it wrong.
And I guess, Darren, with some of the components that you're reading, will that information be made available? So the more detailed answer that you provided?
I'd have to ask. I can't give out our speaking notes. That's just a general, we've never given notes to anybody, because what happens is people hang on to them And then if the tax changes in a couple of years and they don't know, they'll be looking with old information. We've also in the past actually had our notes revised to say what people want to hear. So we just don't give things out. As for the questions that were answered, I'd have to ask Steve and Dolphy later on if they're okay with those answers going to you. And if I can, I'll send them to you.
Great. Sounds
Okay.
good. Thank you.
No problem at all. But unfortunately, my notes, this is coming from way above me. Just don't give them out. There's too much room for error when we give out information like that.
Okay, so people basically need to refer to the specific sections, and we'll have all those sections highlighted at the end.
And you'll have this deck. I sent you this deck PDF, so you can have it to membership. So the deck and these resources are on this deck. And of course, you can ask us questions or at a later date as well.
And we will be making this available to our membership after the fact as well. So both the recording as well as that deck. So, all right, thank you. Turn it back over to you, Darren.
I can come back and hear myself later. Excellent. Nothing I like better than reviewing myself. So I mentioned earlier that there's some differing tax rates in regard to vehicles, and let's look at that a little closer. So I'm not talking about the 7% tax on goods you're buying. I'm talking about actually vehicle sales themselves. So first of all, let's look at ICE vehicles or internal combustion engine, because there's different rates for internal combustion engine and zero emission vehicles. PST rates apply as set out in this table shown on the screen here, and this is right from our information. PST rates depend on whether the vehicle is a passenger vehicle, whether the vehicle is zero emission vehicle, when it was acquired, the value on the vehicle, and how the vehicle is acquired. So as I mentioned, this table is showing tax rates for internal combustion engine vehicles as outlined in Bulletin PST 308. So the first column, outside of first column is the price. Second column in the middle there is a vehicle sold privately or received as a taxable gift. And then that last column are the rates for vehicles sold or received from a GST registrant, like a dealership, that vehicles that are leased or that are imported into Canada. I will ask you to note towards the bottom of the table, there's some lower down, there's some higher tax rates that are in bold, and it will have more to discuss on that in a moment. So that 15 and that 20% rate, I have something to talk about that in a couple of slides. But as you can see here, anything under 55,000 that you're selling, that is purchased from a registrant, will be 7%, and then after 55,000, it slowly goes up. And then for vehicles that are private and purchased or received as a gift, it's 12% at 55,000. Now for zero emission vehicles, this has changed a little bit. The tax rates for vehicles depends on a few things. So for ZEVs, you can note that the tax rate doesn't start to increase till after 75,000. There's actually also an exemption for ZEVs, but I'm going to discuss it again in a couple of slides. So if you're a automotive dealer, you have to know that the rates are different for ZEVs, different for ICE vehicles, and they differ depending on the selling price of the vehicle.
Well, Darren, one question that I will ask, just to make sure we clarify. So when we're saying zero emission vehicles, we're talking battery only vehicles and or hydrogen?
Steve Rizolfi, can you get that one? I mean, actually,
so that includes plug-in hybrids as well, and battery-powered vehicles as well. Generally, like hybrid vehicles, older, Prius models probably would not qualify for that. I think this question was also asked in the chat, and I've put in a brief answer, but like more details are in PST 116, motor vehicle use and leasing.
We just to jump in, we also do have a list of eligible ZEVs, and it's being updated right now. So there's going to be quite a few new vehicles on that list. So if you're unsure if the vehicle you're interested in or whatever is exempt, a good place to start is our exemption list, and we can provide the link for you on that one as well. So I'll get that for you guys.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
All right. And just so Steve and Zolfi know, I do have a slide coming up on the recent exemption for ZEVs. That's coming up down the road. Okay, I know at the beginning I made a big deal about not talking about GST. However, there's one thing we thought we should mention. This has been around for a few years, so you're probably aware of it. But generally, when GST is payable on a good, on which PST is also payable, the PST amount is not included as consideration for the purposes of calculating GST. However, when the 15% or 20% PST rate applies to a vehicle on which GST is payable, the PST amount actually is included in consideration for the purposes of calculating the GST. Now, that's not our thing. That's actually a CRA thing. When a provincial, for us, when the provincial tax rate goes over 12%, the GST, the PST actually becomes part of consideration for GST. If you've got concerns with that application of the GST, unfortunately, that is a question for the CRA, but I'm just putting it out there so that your membership is aware that when the tax rate is higher like that, the GST will then be calculated on the PST as well. I don't know if you saw last year the gentleman who wrote into the, I think it was the son of the province, complaining when he bought his $3.5 million Bugatti that the tax is quite high. Sorry, man, that's just how it is. And this doesn't apply just to vehicles. There are a couple of items like vapor products as well, where the tax rate is high and the GST would apply to that as well. So it's not just your industry as well. Okay, is there any other questions about tax rates before I move on to a few other little items?
Nothing showing up at this point.
Okay, cool. I always kind of hate doing this slide, but it's important information people know. And I think it's been around since 2017, 2018, but it's good to call it out just so anyone new to the industry doesn't get caught. Okay, I think we were asked about courtesy cars. How does PST apply to courtesy cars supplied by a dealer? Well, each month that you use a motor vehicle as a business vehicle, courtesy car, you must calculate the PST due using the following formula. Now, I never promised there wouldn't be math in this. So here's the formula. It's PST payable is 1.75% times the value times number of vehicles times applicable percentage. Now, I don't expect you to memorize this off the slide deck. We have a bulletin, PST 117, motor vehicle dealer use, which has all the formulas in it, and it will contain examples and a bit more detail on it. But this is how you calculate PST for courtesy cars. Now, I did mention there was an exemption for zero emission vehicles. So effective February 23rd last year, so budget last year, used zero emission vehicles are exempt from PST. Now, this exemption applies to purchases and leases of used zero emission vehicles that they must have 6,000 kilometers on the odometer to qualify for the exemption. So that's how we have drawn the line being used, 6,000 K on the odometer. This exemption is in effect until February 22nd, 2027. For purchases, a zero emission vehicle is considered used if it was previously purchased at a retail sale by a person other than the person liable to pay the PST. For leases, a zero emission vehicle is used if it was previously leased by a person other than the current leasee or was previously purchased at a retail sale by a person other than the lessor. For existing leases of used zero emission vehicles, the first lease payment due after February 22nd, 2022, so last year, so we're well past that, is eligible for the exemption. And for lease buyouts, the buyout is only eligible for this exemption if the zero emission vehicle was previously purchased at a retail sale by a person other than the lessor or leased by a person other than the current leasee. And I believe there's more information about this in one of our automotive bulletins, but I can't remember which one exactly. I think it's 308.
PST 308.
308, cool, thank you. This is just new for last year though, yeah.
Darren, just going back to the question, because this is one of the ones that was originally raised early on. And one component here is obviously, the guidelines using the kilometers is one way of assessing it. Obviously, there will be a link provided that talks about what eligible ZEV vehicles are, so we can clarify that. But the last part of their question was, if a dealer is found to be in contravention of the guidelines, would the dealer be charged back the PST? So I guess more of an audit component here.
I can try. Yeah, it is certainly more of an audit thing. I'd say that the potential is there. Yes, I can't confirm. I wouldn't quote what I'm saying, but the potential is there. So I would say proceed as if it's possible, just to be extra cautious.
Okay, and we have a couple more questions that have come up here as well too. So when you're talking about courtesy cars, are you referring to new vehicles that dealerships use or older vehicles the shop may own and use as a courtesy car? I think I know the answer here, but I'll let you guys clarify that.
They're just looking at they're just looking up things there to make sure they give you the best answer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's another question here too after that one. Excellent. It looks like courtesy cars started a whole bunch of questions.
Yes. Oh, this is why industry has all these questions as well too, because nothing unfortunately is cut and dry. And hence the value of having these opportunities to have these discussions.
All right. Assumptions for wholesale vehicles.
Here you go, folks. This is live meeting, and we're dealing with a live situation. So you can see the experts are talking amongst themselves, trying to figure it out. And
yeah, these are all very, very good questions. They are very case by case. It's very difficult to give a perfectly accurate answer for each of them. They're all very specific and like I said, case by case. These are the kind of questions that I would highly encourage you contact Rulings for. That way you'll get an official answer in writing that fits your specific situation. Yeah, but to answer them right now, it's without all the detail in front of me, it could be misleading. I do recommend Rulings for each of these. And again, we'll provide that email address. And again, that's how you get that official written response, which you can use, you know. So unfortunately, I'll have to defer that to contacting Rulings for all of these, although very good questions.
Okay,
interesting,
so
because I would have thought this was going to be an easy one, because I would think a courtesy car is a courtesy car, regardless of whether it's new. But obviously, an excellent question from Andrea, because it's got the panel stumped here. So
yeah, it is like, but Rulings might ask for more information, and they'll give you a more wholesome answer. I'm worried about potentially providing a misleading answer that Rulings will provide a very, very accurate answer. So I'm gonna err on the side of caution on that one and just say Rulings is your best bet for all of these questions.
Okay, so exemptions for wholesale vehicles brought from the US, we probably should get ruling on that one. Courtesy vehicles exempt from PST.
Yeah, on the purchase themselves,
Yeah, okay. Going back to the ZEV exemption, there's a question here. Is there a minimum length of time a vehicle must be insured for minimum length of time, or just have 6,000 kilometers of PST exempt? So if I remember correctly, Steve, is the 6,000 kilometers for a private sale, and then if it's being purchased from a lot, is it 6,000 kilometers as well? I have to look. I haven't looked at that notice in a long time.
You guys all be looking at that one right now.
Okay.
In the meantime, our courtesy vehicles exempt from PST on purchase. I can say that vehicles purchased for the sole purpose of leasing are exempt from PST. As for courtesy vehicles, I would just double check with Rulings. But if vehicles purchased for the sole purpose of course, either resale or lease, it would be exempt from PST.
Yeah. And then courtesy car use, could we review how to assess the PST deal? Let me go back to that slide. So basically, here's how it works. I haven't unfortunately dug into PST 117, but as it states here, every month that use a motor vehicle is a business vehicle, which would be a courtesy car, you calculate PST due using this formula. And I believe this would come from the fact that when you buy the vehicles at wholesale for resale, you wouldn't be paying PST because you're the collecting PST when the vehicle is sold. So now you've moved something for your own use, and this is how you calculate the PST due every month that you use a vehicle as a courtesy car. And I'm hoping I got that assessment correct.
I just wanted to quickly address the question of, is there a minimum length of time or just 6,000 kilometers? I think for insurance related things, it's best to check with ICBC. But for now, the requirement that we have is that it should have it to qualify as a used ZEV. It should have 6,000 kilometers on the odometer. So and I think more information about like rebates and like which vehicles qualify. Stephen, have you already sent the link with the qualifying vehicles?
No, I know
Okay.
it's a package. I'll send it.
Yeah, we will send it after the meeting. But I don't think at this point we can answer like insurance related questions on that.
Yeah, so just 6,000 kilometers to be exempt PST for a used ZEV. They could do it in a month, they could do it in 2 months, but 6,000 on the odometer. Okay. Okay. Oh, here we go. Here's another question that came in. Our shop purchases older vehicles for courtesy cars and pays tax on that purchase. You're paying PST on that purchase. Am I safe to say the PST charge does not apply in that instance?
Okay, sorry, Zolfi and I were chatting there. I don't know if
That's okay. We don't, there's no expectation to have this stuff right at the front of your brain fingertips, gentlemen. I know that you cover every single PST aspect, so don't worry about talking it out first.
Yeah, because we have it clear that, yeah, if the vehicle is purchased for the purpose of lease, it's exempt. And we still have this question of if it's being purchased for courtesy car application, that's one where you stated we may have to get a ruling in that case to clarify that.
Yeah, I'd have to determine if a courtesy vehicle meets the definition of a leased vehicle, basically. And I just don't have the answer off the top of my head. So I've written that down as, one of the questions that I need to find an answer for.
Yeah, I mean, my non in the business brain is thinking like you've bought the vehicle, you own it, you're basically lending it to your customers. But I don't know if there's a tax application to that impact to that at all. So if we can't answer it in the session, we'll get a resource for you. But it sounds like if you already paid PST on it, you wouldn't be doing it again because it's a PST item, PST paid item that you're basically lending to customers.
And I'm assuming that's correct. But again,
Yeah.
I wouldn't quote us on that just yet.
Yeah.
Rulings is still for these very case-by-case specific questions, the rulings is still the best bet. We'll help you as much as we can. But yeah, I'd still advise going to rulings on that one.
Yeah.
Well, if anything, what we're demonstrating through this webinar is that PST is, as much as, there are finite rules, there are a lot of exceptions and there are a lot of needs to clarify the individual components that people have. So if people don't know, and maybe this is one question we can answer, when it comes to the PST, is there a specific department or a specific group? So if I'm on the island, for say, do I have a different contact group there compared to somebody maybe in the lower mainland or somebody in the interior or in the northern regions?
For rulings, you mean?
Assigned?
Rulings is, I believe, centered out of it. There's no specific regional, provincial. Like it's everything from the entire province is fed to our email inbox and dealt with here. There's no regional specific ones.
Okay. So it's not the case that somebody has a PST person that they can reach out to on a regular basis, wouldn't be their main contact. It's always going to be in through the actual ministry itself. Yeah,
exactly. So if you've got someone who's working in Prince George, there isn't someone in Prince George who just does PST. I mean, I don't know if there's anyone even based out of Prince George for us. Everything's pretty much ministry centralized. Like I'm personally based out of Victoria, but I will travel around the province to do presentations. Back in the world when we used to do that. Now it's like this and you're at my house. but we tend to be, I won't say we're centered in Victoria now because we are looking, expanding out, but we don't have team members in different towns that are specifically for PST, for Prince George, or for Kamloops, or for Fort St. John. We're centralized in our ministry.
Excellent. Okay. Well, all right. Why don't we turn it back over to you and we'll continue on with the presentation.
Yeah, I just got some non-industry specific stuff to wrap up, and then I'm going to go through the questions you sent in advance. I'm just thinking of something else here, but let me zip ahead. So refunds. The reason we're mentioning refunds is sometimes people buy stuff from you and then return it, so you have to give the PST back. So as a collector of PST, you may have times when you provide a refund or a credit to a customer for purchase they made. Sellers may refund or credit PST within 180 days of the date the amount was paid or charged. There are two ways you can actually claim the PST refunded to a customer. You may be able to make an adjustment on your PST return or apply to the ministry for a refund. It's important to know that there are limited situations when you can use the return to claim the refund. Pretty much most refunds must be applied to from the ministry. So for example, if you bought a case of wiper blades and you paid PST on them because they're going to be for your own use, and you end up selling half that case to customers and you collect PST on it, so you want a refund of the PST that you paid, you would not do that on your PST return. That would have to be applied for a refund. We don't want people using the PST return as a refunding option that often. It's very, very specific in its use. We do have a bulletin, PST 400, that has more information on PST refunds. We've mentioned audit a couple times. What is an audit? I know audit might be a scary word to people, but an audit is actually a formal examination of your financial records to ensure that you're charging, collecting, filing, and remitting taxes correctly. Auditors exist to ensure that you're paying the correct amount of tax and not the most amount of tax. They actually will advise you if you're entitled to any refunds they discovered during the audit. Audits ensure a level playing field for all businesses and make sure everyone plays by the same rules. If you're at one end of the block and you're doing everything correctly and charging, collecting taxes, and someone at the end of the block isn't and giving themselves a 7% advantage, that's unfair. We're trying to level that playing field. Why would you be chosen for an audit? Well, it could be one of several reasons. It could be a random selection, a referral from another audit, or a request for a refund, or we're just going to be focusing on your industry, which in your case would be automotive. If you're listening to this today and you discover or figure out that you should have been filing and paying PST, but you haven't, we do have something called a voluntary disclosure. There are very specific criteria around making such a disclosure, but ultimately you could avoid penalty charges, and you would see our website for more information on that. It's kind of a rare circumstance, but it is good to know that it's out there. I'm just going to show you quickly the resources I talked about today, and then we'll get into any remaining questions, and I'll read the questions I had in advance. So this is our website, our PST main page. So basically, the stuff I've got circled in the center, you can actually sign up to our What's New service, which will tell you whenever there's a change to the tax. In PST or any other consumption taxes, you get an email when we change things. I do have an easier way you can do that though, because you may not want to see every single update. At the bottom of the slide, you can see the publication and forms circled. This is where you'd want to go to find the bulletins that I've referenced in this presentation. And those bulletins are 116, 117, 118, and 308 PST on vehicles, which is the big one. If you click into one of those publications as a PDF, at the top left corner, you're going to see a subscribe button. If you want to stay informed when anytime we change how the PST applies to your specific industry, you can actually subscribe to that specific bulletin. If you sign up for a What's New service, you may actually be informed when we change consumption tax, any of the consumption taxes or tobacco tax or motor fuel tax may be too much for you. If you subscribe to an individual bulletin, you can actually get informed when we just make a change to your industry that impacts that bulletin. It's a really good way to stay up to date, because as a business owner, you are responsible for knowing what your tax obligations are. We try through this and we try to do outreach and try to let people know, but ultimately it is the responsibility of business to stay aware of taxes and how they change. How would you contact us? We have a taxpayer services line you can call for information, for help. They're Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. CTB Tax Questions is the rulings resource that we talked about. if you write into rulings, as we've been talking about, please provide as much detail as possible. The more detail you provide, the better your answer. We have had situations in the past where people will sort of craft their question to get the answer they want, which may not accurately reflect the real situation. If you can send us links to products on the web or links to your website, invoice examples, if you can redact your personal information, anything that can help us make a better judgment of how the tax applies to you will get you a better answer. And finally, our website, as we talked about. So, David, do you want me to read the questions you had in advance, or do you want to see if there's any new ones that came in?
We have we have one new question.
Okay.
Basically, this one just clarifying in the courtesy vehicle again, and I don't think really you have the opportunity to answer this because it's not up to you as to why something is taxed. But the question is, if tax is paid when you purchase courtesy vehicles, why would PST be payable at 1.75% for business use? So I guess I'll let you answer that, but I assume it's just simply that that is a ruling and a requirement for those vehicles.
Yeah, you know, I'll touch on that one. So yeah, the why we can't really get into, unfortunately, as much as we would like to. We can't. To close the loop on courtesy vehicles, though, to anyone who has a courtesy vehicle related question, I do recommend contacting rulings with your specific situation that you're in. So if you're purchasing a courtesy vehicle, for what purpose? Solely for the purpose of leasing or lending to others, or are there other uses of this vehicle in between lending or leasing? Whatever the situation is that you're in with regards to courtesy vehicles, explain that in full to rulings, and see if there is an exemption that might apply to you in that specific circumstance. Beyond that, unfortunately, I don't think I can answer any more courtesy vehicle questions. I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, if you write in and ask, say, I paid PST on this vehicle, we're using it as a courtesy vehicle, how does it apply? Or we've pulled a vehicle from an inventory that tax was not paid on, how do we do it? Like that, like separate it in those two different examples, and that'll help us get a thing. And I may see if I can expedite that for you a little bit.
Yeah, we may also try through one of our divisions to put forward some of the questions as well too, because then we can maybe look at it from an industry perspective, because obviously the same question and the same answer is going to apply to, 500 body shops in British Columbia that provide courtesy vehicles. They're going to want to know how PST is applied in those cases, so we want to share that.
Yeah,
we've got a couple more questions that have come in here as well too, since we've started talking. So are EVs imported from the USA PST exempt?
So I'm assuming that means zero emission vehicles from the US,
yes.
Are they PST exempt?
Yeah.
Steve or Zulfi, I'm thinking.
If a used EV is imported from the USA, is it PST exempt? I'm going to say it's possible, but things do change when they're brought in from another jurisdiction for use in BC. Of course, if it's purchased in BC for use in BC, we know what the answer is. If it's imported, there's probably there might be some other stipulations involved. So again, that's one of those, and I'm sorry that we're repeating our answers here, but there might be some other stipulations here that get involved, which might not make it entirely PST exempt, but it could be. So I would say looking at the bulletins and maybe rulings again is probably a good idea for a used EV brought in from United States or brought in from anywhere for use in BC. Yeah, again, it's not one of those things I have a quick answer to. Do you, Sophie?
No, I think you're right.
Okay.
I mean, it would have to meet this. It definitely have to meet the mileage stipulation for sure. It'd have to have 6,000 kilometers on it. And then after that, actually, yeah, sorry, I know what my gut's telling me, but I don't want to say it out loud because it could be wrong because I don't live in that world. So, David, can I get a copy of the transcript of these questions when we're done?
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah,
maybe I'll
provide that. And just while we've got that, I'll answer the one question raised by Candace. Yes, the recording of this will be made available to industry. So once we've transposed it, cleaned it up a little bit, we will provide that as well as the PDF of the presentation. So that will be sent out to industry as well. So for those who missed the meeting or missed portions of it.
Okay. And then
our
one more
last
question came
here
in.
that's come up.
Yep.
I'm not sure if this comes up under the other components you were going to be speaking to, but looking at shop supplies. So gases for welding torches, are they taxable? And air conditioning gas, so the freons, things like that, I would assume that it's exempt because it becomes part of the car and part of the collision repair service that was taxed.
Dolphy's nodding. Is that accurate? Or you guys
That's a good sign.
They're thinking, yeah. Man, it's amazing how much I learn about industries when I do these things, because I never even thought about that.
Hi. So for the last question, so generally shop supplies, like Darren mentioned, that don't become part of the vehicle are taxable. So building torches, gases would generally be taxable supplies. But again, I cannot provide a definitive answer right now. But generally, yes. And for like something that becomes part of a vehicle, could be exempt. Depending on what it is. But if it's a really specific question, best bet is to go to rulings, because then you will have something in writing and how it applies specifically to your situation.
Yeah, I mean,
right. So we're gonna have a little bit of legwork on our end here then to try to help formulate some of these, because if I have individual members request the information, we may not as an association know what their answer is to be able to share it with others. So what I'm going to try to do is put together a bit of a listing. I don't have the expertise to go into some of the details, so I'll have to lean on some of my industry members to help clarify some of the questions. But I think we've got enough resources that we can probably put this together and send through a number of different questions through to ruling, so we can share the answers back with industry.
And I can help you with that, David. I can help facilitate that. But I mean, based on what I said, it sounds accurate. But we'll get that clear. Is there a dollar limit on the PST exemption for used ZEVs? ZEVs?
There's no, to the best of my knowledge, there is no dollar limit. I haven't seen it. There's a, I'm working on updating the used ZEV list right now. And I mean, there's a Ferrari Stradale on it. I have no idea what the asking price is for that. I haven't seen a dollar limit. It's the type of vehicle. So yeah. Yeah.
If it meets the criteria, it's exempt, it's exempt.
Yeah.
David, one question came in about abrasives. Are they exempt?
Yes.
I actually don't understand what an abrasive is. I'm sorry about my ignorance on that.
Sandpaper, and again, so things used in the repair of a vehicle, but not physically leaving with the vehicle. So it's a shop supply to some extent.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Steve Rizolfi, can you answer that one? Do you think, does it count as a shop supply?
Yeah, these look like shop supplies. So my understanding is they would not be exempt because
you basically buy it, use it doing the work, and it doesn't go with the customer out the door. Yeah, like you're the end user of buying the abrasive.
Yeah.
Well, abrasives have an exemption. Shoot. Can we compile a list of exempt shop and safety supplies for the members? Okay, let me take that one away because I can't do it right this moment. Are imports from other provinces and the United States considered exempt with PST? That one I don't know. But I mean, if we go back to the original beginning of my presentation, I said that goods that you bring into the province for use in the province, you need to charge PST on. I think that's kind of part of the answer there.
Mm-hmm.
And after this one, I'll go to your questions in advance, because that's probably going to trigger some more stuff too.
And somebody's identified here that abrasives have an exemption. So.
Yeah, I have to look at that. Sorry, I don't know the list of exempt items. I apologize for that.
Yeah, I guess the correct answer would be if it's used in the shop, it's applicable to PST unless a specific exemption applies. So if I'm honestly not entirely sure about abrasives and what equipment is exactly exempt. But if abrasives are exempt under the PSTA or the regs, then the exemption would continue to apply. But I'd have to double check that as well.
Yeah, if you have a chance to pop into 201 and take a look when I'm reading the other 4 questions, that'd be great. Oh, 15, awesome. Someone actually knows page 15, bulletin 301. That's the state tournaments. Thank you so much for that. We were going to try. I can't, unfortunately, multitask too much here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and read the 4 questions, the 4 long answers I've got here that were submitted in advance, just to make sure we get those covered in the time we've got remaining. But I will say that I do like 2 or 3 presentations a month. This is the most in-depth questions I've received. So it's fantastic to see how engaged your membership is. Okay, the first question I received in advance is sublet repair. So subletting. How is PST applicable when services are provided by an outside source or at a separate service location? So I apologize for how dull this is. I'm going to just read. If repair location A subcontracts location B to perform related services to a vehicle brought into location A by a customer, location A collects a PST on all applicable services from the customer. There's a section of the PST Act that states a purchaser who purchases a related service is exempt from tax on the purchase if that purchase is made for the purpose only of selling the related service to other persons. Therefore, location B, as the subcontracted party, does not charge or pay PST on the related service provided. Location A provides location B their PST number, and location A charges the customer PST on the cost of related services provided by location B. Bulletin 118, Vehicle Service and Parts, states, you do not pay PST on services for vehicles you purchase from a third party, such as when you send a customer's vehicle to an auto body shop for repairs. Generally, you charge PST on the resale of those services to your customer. Customers must not be double taxed. For more information on subcontracted related services, see Bulletin PST 118, as I showed you earlier. Some other exemptions that apply. PST is not charged on related services provided to a vehicle that is brought into BC for the sole purpose of receiving the related service. Documentation would be required to support that. And PST is charged at the rate of 7% on related services to a vehicle that's sent outside of British Columbia for the sole purpose of receiving that related service. So for more information on vehicles brought into BC or sent outside of BC for the sole purpose of receiving related services, you see our Bulletin 118, Bulletin 116, and Bulletin 301 related services all have content on that.
Yeah, so just to clarify then, so if the vehicle is brought into BC because there might be a service shortage in a particular area, or in some cases there might be a lack of OEM certified facilities to repair those cars, PST, there would be no PST on that. But if a BC company sends a vehicle out to another province for that same purpose, PST would be applicable in that case.
Yeah, you need to think about where the vehicle is ordinarily situated. So for example, if you've got someone in Canmore who needs auto body repair and there's a provider in Golden that can do it, and the vehicle is just put on a truck, taken to Golden, the service is done and taken back to Canmore, and no use is made of the vehicle in British Columbia, then you're correct. And then in reverse, the reverse applies, except adding PST. If the vehicle is ordinarily situated in Golden, so I'm just using border communities because it's easy, and then shipped to Canmore for the work and then shipped back, then PST would apply because the vehicle is ordinarily situated in British Columbia.
Yeah.
And Steve Adolfo will tell me if I'm wrong, and they haven't told me I'm wrong, so I think I got that one. It's actually, I know that one from Real Property Contractors. It's the same for like cabinetry and things like that. Okay, someone asked earlier about double taxation. What if this occurs and how is it handled? If the question is about paying tax twice, generally to claim a refund of PST paid on a motor vehicle, you use Form 355 application for refund of PST paid on a motor vehicle. Double taxation is talking about taxing the same transaction twice. The PST Act is structured in such a way as to prevent double taxation from occurring. So in the case of vehicles, for example, ICBC does not collect PST if it has already been collected by a registrant or if it has already been paid to the ministry. This hopefully helps explain why it does not occur. Taxing used vehicle is also not double taxation because the tax applies once for every transaction. If PST did not apply to private sales, there will be market distortion. People will be less inclined to purchase new vehicles or even used vehicles sold by dealerships. Tax revenue collected on the sale of used vehicles is used to support spending in British Columbia. So if this question is about paying tax on tax, so for example, paying federal luxury tax on GST where applicable, generally when PST is payable on a good in which PST is also payable, the PST amount is not included as consideration for calculating the GST. And as I mentioned earlier, when the 15 or 20% rate applies, then the PST amount is included in consideration for the purposes of calculating GST. The new federal luxury tax is not included in the purchase price for the purposes of calculating PST, and the federal luxury tax does not apply to PST. So for example, a person purchased a motor vehicle for $130,000 in Vancouver from a GST registrant or dealership. PST applies at a rate of 15% for a total of $19,500, and then GST applies to the price of the vehicle, the PST, and the federal luxury tax. PST does not apply to federal luxury tax. So I hope that covers double taxation. I hope we kind of got where you're looking on that one. I'm sure I'll hear if not. Next question. Why is PST chargeable on diagnostic or repair labor at a business and service calls or jumpstart labor is not? So we can only answer again how PST applies, not why. Following services are also exempt from PST. So diagnostic, estimating services, safety inspections, and testing services. But those services are not exempt, however, if provided with a related service that is subject to PST, or is provided to a leased vehicle by the lessor or by a third party through a contract with the lessor. So for example, if you provide a diagnostic service and also provide a repair service, both services are subject to PST as the repair service is a taxable related service. The following roadside and emergency services are exempt. So battery boosting, but that excludes recharging, but battery boosting, delivering gas as a roadside service is exempt. Roadside tire changing, roadside unlocking, and towing services, including retrieval fees, are exempt. All the services listed above are not exempt if provided to a leased vehicle by the lessor or by a third party through a contract of lease with the lessor. So I hope that covers that one off. I think I read everything on that. Okay, and finally, why should a vehicle rental company who collects PST on rentals have to pay PST on purchases? Well, a motor vehicle rental company which purchases a vehicle for the purpose only of leasing is exempt from PST. Is exempt from PST. So therefore, a motor vehicle rental company purchasing a vehicle for the sole purpose of leasing the vehicle as a short-term rental is exempt from PST. The Provincial Sales Tax Act defines a short-term rental vehicle as a multi-jurisdictional vehicle that, during a vehicle license period, is leased primarily for periods of 28 days or less, and is made available to the public for leasing referred to as in paragraph A. A lessee must pay PST when leasing a short-term rental vehicle. So like I'm renting a vehicle from Budget to go to Whistler next month for a presentation, I'm paying PST on that rental. In addition to PST, a lessee must pay the passenger vehicle rental tax, or PVRT, of $150 a day for a 24-hour period for a short-term rental vehicle if that vehicle is rented for a period of more than 8 consecutive hours and 28 consecutive days or less. The rental company must charge and collect PST and PVRT on the rental of the short-term rental vehicle and remit both taxes with the PST return. And the rate of PST on the rental is 7% to 10, 15, or 20%, depending on the passenger vehicle's tax rate value. So I think answering that question in shorthand is a vehicle rental company that collects PST and rentals shouldn't really be paying PST on the purchases because they're purchasing them for the purpose of leasing. And under the PST Act, section 142.1, they're exempt. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Darren. Just keep in mind that would be for the sole purpose of leasing. If there's any change of use, or if it's used for leasing out to a customer or any other purpose at the same time in between leasing, it could change. So if there's
Yeah.
anything else you're doing with that vehicle other than simply solely leasing it out to a customer, I would recommend that you submit that situation to rulings again to get a specific answer.
Yeah, but just generally, like if you're just a car rental company,
yeah,
you should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping those answers help a little bit. I'm going to find out from Steve and Zulfi later. I won't ask them to tell me now, but if I can send these to you directly, I'm not sure. I'll find out if I can, and then you could have them. But I'm not 100% sure on that, so let's not get excited. Another question came in related to used vehicle imports, which I don't know if we can fulsomely answer or not, but in reference to ZEVs and PST-free purchases, are imports from the US and other provinces qualifying for the current ZEV mandate, especially for used EV sales, assuming that they qualify? And I think we were saying that we thought they would, but when there's an import situation, it could change. So maybe we want to get a clarification from that from rulings.
Yeah, I would second that. It's clear as to what the exemption means if you purchase the used EV in BC for use in BC. Use in BC. But if it's brought in from another jurisdiction, there could be some stipulations there. So if it's brought in from Alberta or anywhere in the United States or Japan or anything, there could be some other specific stipulations that apply to that situation that I can't really speak to off the top of my head. So again, that would be a rulings question. Yeah.
Yeah, so the one thing we're seeing is just how complex the application of PST is, and it's really dependent upon the specifics, because we can only make so much black and white, and there is going to be gray matter here in these things. So it looks like the use of the rulings is going to be probably industry's best friend in order to ensure that there are no questions or concerns, because last thing anybody wants to do is incorrectly apply it, then have an audit, and then be penalized at some later date for not having applied PST correctly.
Yeah, like I know at the beginning I said PST applies to goods brought into BC for use in BC unless a specific exemption applies, and there is a specific exemption for ZEVs. However, I would just like Stephen and Zulfi said, like with vehicles, there may be a stipulation we don't know 100% about. So it's difficult to answer these questions in real time because we can't sit down for an hour and crack the legislation and take a look and really dive into it like rulings does. We're trying to do it off the top of our heads, and we don't want to inform you incorrectly.
Mm-hmm. And I know that somebody had asked earlier whether or not there's a possibility of receiving a list of exemptions, but the exemptions are so specific to the topic being discussed that I don't know that an exemption list would necessarily be of any benefit, because without having the context of what the exemption is talking about, it wouldn't make sense. So I think we need to look at more detail and just continue to have industry pass some questions our way so that we can investigate them and through yourself, Darren, and then see if we can get some sort of a written response that we can provide in general to industry.
Yeah, I'm just saying this. I'm looking at this last one. If you as a group compile a list of supplies to review for shop supplies, can the answer be used by all the shops? You're trying to get a detailed list for industry. Well, there is a list. Was it in 118 or was it in 201? I can't remember where it was, or 315 someone had as well. And all the numbers are making my head spin. I just hesitate to say that something is a blanket for everybody, because if someone misapplies the situation, it won't be correct. But I mean, if you write in or ask us specifically about things, we can do our best. We'll do our best to narrow it down for you and give you responses to that. That's something we can try and look at. It's hard for me again to just answer on the fly here. Shop safety supplies like gloves, uniform, masks, taxable. That'll be in. There's a bulletin for safety supplies. Not all shop supplies and safety supplies are exempt. Some are. I'd have to look at the bulletin for that one. I don't know.
Sorry for the echo, folks.
It's okay.
So generally, just to answer this question about shop supplies, so there are some exemptions for personal protective equipment, PPE. So I can share like the specific exemption in our PST Act and exemptions, but KF94 masks, for example, N95 mask and KN95 masks are exempt. You don't need to provide any proof of those. But if generally an exemption applies if the product, like gloves, for example, they're designed to be worn by a worker. So it's very specific, and usually the marketing materials or the on the gloves specify if those gloves or those masks are like designed to be worn by a worker. And in most cases, we do receive a lot of like ruling requests on personal protective equipment. So if you have like a specific question on that, whether that specific glove or that specific mask qualifies for exemption, we do encourage you to reach out to ctap.taxquestions@gov.bc.ca.
Yeah.
But for information on protective clothing for workers, you can refer to PST 100. It's called safety equipment. I can also put it in the chat, or PST 207 and PST 201 as well. So I'll just put those bulletins with the link as well.
Perfect. And one question, Zolfi, that comes to mind now that you're talking about the items that are put in through the rulings. Is there access to previous responses that industry is able to see from rulings? So if a question has already been asked or a question has already been raised and a ruling's been provided, does the general public have access to those answers, or do they only have access to the questions that they put in themselves?
So I think, sorry, I didn't get the first part. We're just trying to reduce the echo between us. But I think what you're trying to ask is that if somebody asks a ruling question, is it like available for like everyone to see or not? I cannot say definitively, but my understanding is that because you share your personal and confidential like business information when you ask for a ruling, I don't think we can share that generally with the public, because you wouldn't want your like personal like business information to be public. So
yeah,
my answer right now is that it would not be available, but I can check it and come back to you.
I can actually let you know that the rulings database is not available to the public. It's not even available to me, to be quite honest. And some of the reasons would include privacy. Some of the reasons would be if someone downloaded or printed a response and then that tax changed, that we made a budget change 2 years down the road and they're holding on to that, then it's wrong. Or they may have read the person's question wrong, interpret it to meet what they have, and then their answer is incorrect. So there's so many little variations that can happen. The rulings database is just not available to the public. Like I said, I can't even access it.
Yeah, so I think one of the items that you identified early on, or just in the discussion here, is that if people see a specific bulletin that applies to their industry, they should subscribe to that bulletin so that if there's updates to that bulletin, they'll at least be made aware. So
yeah, let me see if I can show you how to.
Sorry, on that note, David, if you're going to submit questions to rulings and then disperse the answers to industry, another thing that you could do, I think that would be helpful, is if you have a list of items that you would like to see in our public information. If there's a list that would help the industry do business or interpret PST more accurately, if there's anything that you guys would like to see in our public information, let us know, and then we can pass that on upward and hopefully include some new information or update something that would help you guys.
yeah, that'd be great, because you can see that there's a lot of questions in regards to importation of vehicles, and a lot of questions around shop supplies. So probably there's a couple of areas right there that would answer questions that everybody seems to be having. So
can you see my screen with the bulletin up on it?
yes.
Okay, so the subscribe button's right there. You click on that, subscribe. Whenever we make a change to safety equipment, protective clothing, you'll get an update. And that would be for any of the bulletins as well.
And that's definitely something that we'll share with industry, because I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, I think there's is exempt goods here. I don't want to go through all the stuff, right? I mean, I'm not going to go through every bulletin right now on the screen, because I just bore the heck out of you. And we're running low on time, but this is what the publications page looks like. So you can see industry specific, charging, collecting PST. There's 16 motor vehicle dealers, motor vehicle dealer use and manufacturer use, and then vehicle services and parts. 200 is exemptions and documentation requirements. Sorry, I said 201, but it's 200. Goods for resale is 208. Get down here at related services at 301. Goods brought into BC. PST and vehicles is 308. Most of the stuff's in 308. Refunds is down here, 400. And then notices 2022-005. PST and vehicles purchased at private sales or imported from outside Canada is here as well. And the yeah, so it's all on here. We've got 5 minutes left. One question that came in here. Oh, you're welcome. I hope the job was well done. Does PST have to be collected in BC purchases when new to the PST dictating? I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding what the question is there.
Sorry, Delaware. Yeah, your question is a little bit convoluted. So
yeah.
But I know that we do have access into the various notices as you've identified as well too. So
yeah.
So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to close this off here on the question component here, because I think you know, we've obviously covered off a lot of information. You know, Darren and team Stephen and Zulfi, really want to thank you guys for coming out today and providing this information. Obviously, very complex matter, very specific to each individual user and the questions and concerns they may have. So obviously, if anything we've learned from today, a couple of things is that the rulings is the appropriate way to go if there is some gray matter and we want to get some clarification. We as an association will try to put some items together to be able to at least give industry some guidance. But again, obviously, everybody's specific use is specific to them. So they need to make sure if they're at all questioning the coverage. But otherwise, yeah, the email and then the website are probably the two best things for people to become familiar with and to subscribe to the bulletins that pertain to their particular industry so they're kept abreast. Yeah,
and if you can send me a transcript of these questions, David, I'll see if I can maybe collate some of the more common ones. Perfect. As opposed to having everybody send them in. I'll let you know on that. I don't want to make any promises because I can't promise rulings resources dedicated, but get them to me and maybe we can try and collate it and keep it all together in one spot instead of 75 attendees all sending the same question at once. So I'll let you know shortly after the presentation if we can do
Sounds
that.
Good.
Sorry, David, I was just going to quickly add that I've answered Mike's comment at the end there. So under the answered Q&A, I do have the list of ZEVs there, if that interests anybody. That is to be updated fairly soon here as well. So we can also email that to you as well.
Perfect. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for participating today. We've got about a minute and a half left on our time frame here. So
I thought we'd be short. I was worried about being short.
Yeah, there you go. Now you know. Well, thank you guys very much. It's really good to see that, you know, there are people within the ministry, there are people within taxation, they're all human, and we all try to work together. And this is just a good example of how we can bring, you know, two groups together to help to clarify this and make sure that, you know, people are not getting into trouble, because, you know, I'm sure nobody from the ministry wants to see people getting penalized, and certainly nobody in the industry wants to be penalized. We just want to make sure we're doing it right and we have a general understanding. But it's just a sign of the complexity of our world today that nobody can give you a direct answer on these things because it is so specific to the issue at hand.
Yeah, and just to add, Zulfi, Stephen, we actually also work in areas, we're different areas, but same, that works on updating bulletins and information. If we're finding there's a gap in the content from your questions and that, we will work to eventually fill that in the bulletins. This is not happening in a vacuum. I mean, I can, you know, like if Stephen and Zulfi see like, oh, well, everyone's asked about this importing question, we may have the opportunity to get it added to a bulletin as an update in the future. I mean, again, no promises, but if there's a really big common thing we're seeing, we can look to address that in the public information as well.
Excellent. All right, last 10 seconds. We had to use it up.
Holy cow.
Enjoy the balance of your day and hope everybody has a good weekend, and stay away from the smoke and the forest fires.
Yeah, we're lucky here on the island. We don't have that yet. But again, thanks to you to all members. I apologize. I was the last minute fill in, so I didn't have it memorized or anything. I had to read off notes. Stephen, Zulfi, thank you so much for the questions. So I apologize that we did have to ask rulings, but honestly, you're better served getting the most accurate answer the first time as opposed to us trying and maybe getting something slightly incorrect. So thank you and have yourself all a great day.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.